Well, hi everyone. Um, I guess the question that people ask me is why did I come to buy a Tesla Model 3 SR Plus? The reason's pretty simple. It started a little while ago. I was looking for a replacement for a Jaguar X-Type estate. I had a Sovereign. It had all the fancy goodies, and I went testing cars. Well, over 50 years, I've driven close on probably 750,000 miles. I've had a selection of Fords, the XR3 when it first came out, GTI Sirocco, I had a Jaguar XJS V12, and bought the last fast car I bought was a Civic Type R, and I enjoyed driving them. So for the past 7 years, I've settled down and had this Jaguar X-Type, and so I went looking for a Mercedes 3, Audi A4, something of that sort of ilk. And I started with Jaguars, and I felt fairly confident after 12 years, which is how old the Sovereign was. I thought I'd find a car that that would have at least all the goodies the Sovereign did. And I was pretty shocked. What I found was that really they'd not moved on. The technology had just stagnated. Okay, they had slight improvements in some areas, but not really anything you would say was better than my car, which was 12-year-old, and actually it was probably about 19 years 19 years ago it first came onto the market. And I was a bit disappointed. So I thought, well, what's the option? Well, Tesla's possibly one of them. And I decided to splash it out on the bottom of the line Tesla. The only option I had was grey, and being from technology world, I went for the autopilot, the full autopilot. So 2 months on, how do I find it? Well, firstly, I would look at it as a basic means of transport. It has to get me from A to B comfortably and efficiently. And from that point of view, the Tesla is a first-class car. It's as good, if not better, than BMWs, Audis, Jaguars. It doesn't fail on doing the basic things well. So let's look at it from some of the other issues. Well, performance, it's stunning. The ability to put your foot down and just leave anything else standing is really quite stunning. It's the way it does it as well. There's no gears, there's no noise, it just does it. I tested a ice car, and it had 8 gears, automatic, and it spent all its time changing gear, or so it seemed. So what about comfort? Is it a comfortable car to sit in? Because I've been in BMWs that, put it bluntly, I would never buy in my life because they were so uncomfortable over a 2-hour drive. I'm sure they've improved, but in the Tesla, the seats are magic. I've done some long drives in it, 4 hours, and I found that I get out feeling fresh, which, as you get older, that gets harder. The suspension is not too hard, it's not too soft. It's pretty well spot on, I would say. Handling, well, I've not explored it fully. This is the first rear-wheel drive car, because I've had a lot of four-wheel drives and front-wheel drives and four-wheel drives and SUVs, and this is the first rear-wheel drive car I've had since it's probably the early 90s. So I'm getting used to it again, but I do find it's so light, and it's good fun. So what about space? Well, The space inside is brilliant. I like the sunroof. It's not a sunroof, it's a panoramic roof. And I would say the boot is big, but the entrance to it is quite small. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out. It'll take suitcases and things, but if you want to put anything big in there, you've got a problem. And Tesla haven't really sorted out roof racks and tow bars. They need to make the facilities available for tow bars and for putting on a roof rack. I can't even get hold of a roof rack. I tried Tesla and it seems they've withdrawn the ones that fitted into the roof. So I'm looking at possibly stick-on ones and so on. That's one of the things that Tesla need to work on. As to the goodies, well, it's difficult to list them all. It's full of them. I love having my phone as the key. The biggest problem I have is I then go and leave my keys at home, so I don't take my house key with me. I go out, my wife goes out, door gets locked, and I can't get back in. But using the phone and just walking to the car, walking away from the car, and knowing that it's a secure mechanism is really cool. What about the rest? Well, I love Spotify. I love Sentry Mode. Sentry Mode is really good when you park in a car park. You can stick Sentry Mode in, and if someone bashes it, you're going to be able to pick out who's done it and let them pay for the repairs. There's obviously the auto driving. I'll come on to that in a minute. So everything seems to have been well worked through. It's been thought through and well implemented. It works better than I expected it to. I thought there'd be some rough edges from what I'd heard, but I found it's actually everything is pretty slick. Okay, what about the dashboard? Well, the radically different dashboard I find is great. It's interesting, my wife bought a new Nissan Leaf. She replaced her old one. She still searches for the stop-start button where the old one used to be. And it seems to me that having everything in one place really does make things quite easy to find and easy to use. The speedometer, it's hardly a glance. I only have one eye. So for me, that's fairly critical, being able to see things quickly at a glance. So I don't want to take my eye off the road. So I find that the speedometer is really easy to read. It's clear. It's not in a fancy binnacle or anything. It's just there to read in black on white, which is perfect. And of course, there's no confusion. There's no rev counters, no temperature gauges, no oil pressure lights. The Jaguar seemed to have 101 different lights that lit up when you first started the car. Tesla's got nothing of that. So I've come to appreciate the screen. I know it's going to be a lot cheaper to make and change than typical ICE cars, which really haven't updated since, I guess it was probably the 80s and 90s when they started cramming a load of padding around things to stop you bashing your head on them when you crashed. And they've not really thought it through again. So we're left with the autopilot. Does it work? Yeah, it works pretty well on a motorway, I would say. On the motorway, I find the autopilot's brilliant. I have a little gadget that, it's actually £1 worth of 2p coins in a bit of Velcro with a bit of Velcro wrapped round, and I attach that to the steering wheel and it stops it dropping out of autopilot. So is this safe? Well, my argument would be, when I was in a Jaguar, if I would fall asleep, I would find that I would either drive off the road altogether, I could drive into the car in the next lane, or I could smash into the car in front of it stopped. But if I'm in autopilot, it keeps me in the lane perfectly, and if the car in front slows down, my Tesla will slow down with it. If it accelerates, it'll accelerate with it. So I'm quite comfortable that what I've done is actually very safe. I think it's only the German car manufacturers foresee you to go down the route of stopping Tesla taking such a big advantage in the marketplace. So where does that leave us? Oh, by the way, a pound's worth of 2p coins weighs 12 ounces, and you attach it to the side of the steering wheel. So is it all sweetness and light? Well, I guess one of the gripes I had right from the beginning was the interior door handle. I've found I've knocked the switches on the windows when getting out, particularly if it's raining, and so you walk out away from the car with the windows wound down, which is not very clever. What it is that there's no easy way to hold on to the door when you open it. Now, I've not had a strong wind, but if I got a strong wind, I suspect I wouldn't be able to stop the door from slamming wide open and bashing into whatever was on the outside of the car. If there was a car next door, it would whack into it. I'm seriously thinking of drilling some holes in them, 3D printing a finger hold to go in there, to go into the handle. It's probably the worst bit of design I found on the car. So what about the rest? Well, the biggest problem is Tesla support don't seem to have got their act together. They don't seem to have a clue what they're doing. If you go on the forums, you get 20 answers for any one problem. They could react, they could be wrong, they could be out of date. Because Tesla are updating things all the time, you never know quite whether an answer is correct or it was correct 3 months ago but it's no longer right. Tesla need to get themselves sorted out in terms of providing a forum which has some senior engineers on it. I know when I worked for a database company, I used to go on a forum and you knew there were 3 or 4 people like myself who would go on that forum and would answer people's questions that were tricky ones. And that's what Tesla needs to get to grips with. They need to persuade a few of their engineers to spend an evening or 2 a week going on the forums and making sure their answers came to the top of the list and were registered. The over-the-air updates, problems seem to get fixed quickly. I mean, maybe that's the problem, because they don't really have very good release notes. The release notes don't tell you what's being fixed. So you could have a problem one week and it disappears the next. I've had that where a release went in and a few days later there was another release, but in the meantime I had difficulty getting into the car with my phone and I had to use a key card. They don't make it clear what they're fixing. So it leaves one last problem, that is range. Is it a problem? It's certainly the elephant in the room as regards EVs. Well, my goal was to be able to drive a car for 2 hours, 70 miles an hour, then pull into services, go and have a drink of coffee, a croissant or something, or a bun, and top up, and then drive on again. Maybe 25 minutes, half an hour. And what I've found is that Tesla, the SR3 Plus, fits perfectly into that. I can stop off after driving for 2 hours and have my coffee and croissant, have a toilet break and get back in the car and carry on driving for another 2 hours. And it's actually that second 2 hours that's the critical one, because you can always top up to the top when you set off, but it's the second 2 hours that you find, well, once you get to 80%, it slows right down on charging in electric cars. It's the same with the Nissan Leaf. They all seem to be very much the same. So you need to have a car that is efficient. Efficiency is key in this sort of area. I've been down to 7 miles when arriving at a supercharger. To cut a long story short, I set off. I had 59 miles to go and 58 miles on the clock available to me. So I drove at 50 miles an hour and pulled back some miles and got to in the end, in fact, I went back up to 70 because I found if I turned the heating off, that would gain me a few more miles. And I got to the supercharger comfortably with 7 miles on the clock. So you can adjust your speed and compensate for being short on miles. So what about the best experience I've had? Well, I really enjoyed it when I drove down to see my son in London. He lives near the Oval, and I drove straight into the ULEZ emission zone, which in my previous car wouldn't have been allowed to do, not without paying a large amount of money. I went straight through the congestion charge zone, because it doesn't apply to electric cars. And I drove up the Mall, saw Buckhouse, Big Ben, Parliament. And the interesting thing I found was it took me an hour to get from the end of the M1 to my son's house near the Oval. And 45 years ago, I probably did a very similar journey in about the same sort of time. So the congestion charge has relieved the load on central London. It's great to be able to drive through it all. Okay, thanks very much.